Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make my mom's lasagna gluten-free. This is legendary in our family. She has been making it for many years and it is so good. So let's get into it and I'll show you how to make it. Okay, the first thing I've done is I've made my sauce because you really want to get all of your components together for the lasagna beforehand so then it goes really quickly when you're layering it. This is my mom's spaghetti sauce, or meat sauce if you want to call it that. My version of her sauce uses hot Italian sausage instead of pork sausage. And this consistency here is absolutely perfect for spaghetti and meatballs, but not so much for lasagna. So I really need to cook this down a little longer because it really needs to be thicker. So I'm going to leave this on the heat and cook it down a little longer. If you want to see how to make the sauce, check out my spaghetti and meatballs video, which goes into the step-by-step detail. But otherwise, I'm going to let this cook down and we'll get started on our pasta. So in my food processor, I already have 2 cups or 280 grams of my gluten-free bread flour blend. And I'm adding to that a 1/4 cup or 30 grams of tapioca starch and 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. And I'm just going to pulse this to combine. And then I'm going to add in 2 whole eggs and 4 large egg yolks, as well as 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And we'll pulse this 8 to 10 times to get everything distributed evenly. So now that it's pulsed, I'm going to put the processor on low, just running constantly, and I'm going to drizzle in 2 to 4 tablespoons of water. This amount will depend on the humidity in your area, so I cannot give you exact amounts. Sometimes I use all the water, sometimes I have a little left over. What you're going for is for the dough to start forming a ball and kind of riding the blade just like this. And when it does that, stop it and check the consistency because you don't want to keep adding more water before you see that because it takes a little bit to get fully combined. Right here, this is the perfect consistency. It's tacky, but it's not overly sticky. And I still had a little bit of water left over. Okay, so now I'm just going to knead this on a little bit of flour, and that's my gluten-free bread flour blend, until it's nice and smooth, and knead it into a ball. And then I'll wrap this in plastic wrap and let it sit for about 30 minutes or so on the counter just to properly hydrate. Okay, so now we'll get on with the white sauce or bechamel. My mom calls this white sauce. It is this exact same thing as bechamel. And we start by melting 4 tablespoons or 56 grams of butter in a small saucepan. And then to that, we're going to add 4 tablespoons or 30 grams of cornstarch. And this would normally be flour, but of course I add cornstarch when it's flour because it just makes my life a whole lot simpler. Plus, I don't like to use anything with xanthan gum in a sauce like this. And I want to combine this for at least a good 30 seconds to a minute before adding in my milk. And this is 2 cups or 480 milliliters of whole milk. You might need a little more because it does thicken up as it cools. I'm actually making a double batch here because I really love this sauce and I can use it for so many different things. You can make a cheese sauce out of it, or I don't know, croque monsieur? Is it croque monsieur or croque madame? I don't know, but it's used for a lot of different things. And the funny story behind this is my mom was in Spain and she wanted to make the lasagna. I think it was my grandmother's recipe, but my grandmother had cottage cheese in it, and my mom thought that none of us kids would like the cottage cheese, and she would have probably been right. And So she learned from a German woman in Spain to use the bechamel, which I believe is the Italian way. So from Germany to Spain to Italy, we have this lasagna. It's been around the world, literally. Okay, so we're just going to continue whisking this and bring it back to a boil and let it boil for a good 30 seconds to a minute, and this is done. Okay, this is half the pasta dough. I put away the other half in the fridge for another use, such as spaghetti or ravioli, cheese ravioli. You should see that video if you haven't yet. Check it out. The link is above, I believe. It will be above. And I'm just going to cut this in half and just work with one half at a time. It's much easier to work with lesser dough because as it gets thinner and thinner, it gets longer and longer and you just don't have room for it. Or at least I don't. Maybe everybody else does, but I have a very small kitchen and very small workspace. Okay, so I'm flattening this out slightly and I've got my KitchenAid pasta roller on my KitchenAid. If you don't have one of these and you want to make your own pasta, this is the way to go. However, they do have hand cranked ones that are just as good, not as speedy, but they're just as good. This is actually my old one and my mom gave me hers, and my old one in this video, it has some stuff stuck to the roller. So that's why it's making these like indentations in the bottom, and I have to keep adding some flour to it. But once you get it started on level 1, it'll go fine. And then you can switch to level 2 and level 3 and so on and so forth. So you can watch like a more in-depth of using that on my pasta video. And that's just solely on making homemade pasta. But I'm putting a little bit more flour on the dough as I'm rolling it out. Sometimes it will tend to stick a little too much in this old one that I had, but again, now I've got my mom, so it's much better. She just didn't use it anymore, and I was happy to take it off her hands. So now I've switched to number 2, and then I run it through once, and then go to number 3, and this is once, and you see how long this starts getting. And I tend to, at this point, I tend to cut it in half so it's a little easier to work with. So now we'll bump it to 4. And you can really do as thin or as thick as you like. But you have to remember that whatever thinness you make it when it's raw, it is going to be a little thicker when it's cooked. So this is now 4 that we're going for. So this piece is going through at 4, level 4. And now I'll do the other piece at level 4 as well. And then we'll see where we're at. It's already pretty thin, honestly. But again, it's going to plump up once it's baked in all of those juices. So let's see how this is before we decide whether we're going to go one more level or not. See how you can see my hand through it. So it is pretty thin, but I think I'm going to go for one more level on this. And then I'll see how it is from there. So up to 5, bump it up to 5, and we'll put both of these through, and then we'll see. That's looking pretty good. So I'm going to stop at this point. I have to do 5 on the other piece as well. But I think I'm going to stop. You could go, like I said, on to 6. I think my machine goes up to 8, if I'm not mistaken, which would be extremely thin. But I wouldn't go beyond 6 really, because you're going to have like a really, really thin sheet of dough, unless you want that. Okay, so now we're going to cut these just to make them fit into our pan. I am using a 9 by 13 inch pan. So I'm going to cut them about 9 inches each. And you will need, it'll depend. You might have to piece together some of these because these are homemade. They're not like, you know, perfectly going to fit in your pan. So you may have to piece them together. All right, so I'm going to cut this other piece and then I'm going to roll out the other half of my dough, and then I will meet you back here and we're going to put this all together. The best lasagna ever. Gluten-free. All right, guys, let's go ahead and assemble this thing so that we can get it into the oven. And my oven has been preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm just putting down a thin layer of sauce on the bottom before I put the first layer of noodles. My sauce is really chunky, as you can see, so it's hard to do a real thin layer, but just, you know, make do with what you can. And this is a really, as you know, lasagnas are really great things to have on hand in your freezer. They're perfect for make ahead. I remember when my kids were born, my mom brought me and my then husband a pan of lasagna, and it was so great. When you have a newborn baby, it is absolutely perfect, the perfect thing to have. Okay, I'm laying down 2 sheets of my lasagna noodles, and I think that's all I'll need for this because they are much wider than a typical noodle would be. And now I'll go ahead and put a good layer of my sauce on top and see how this has thickened up nicely. It actually is cold right now, so I've let it cool down significantly before doing all this layering. You don't have to, but you definitely can do all of this in advance. Have it ready to go like the day before or whatever. You can make the white sauce a couple days beforehand. You can make the spaghetti sauce, like you can put that spaghetti sauce in your freezer for, I don't know, months, 3 to 6 months or so. And I'm just making this even thick layer of the sauce, and we're going to do 3 layers. So I'll show you the first one, and then we'll go quickly through the rest of them. Now this is the white sauce or bechamel, and my mom has always done 3 strips along each, like along the length of the pan. So that's what I do. And I love, like, this is one of the best parts of lasagna is that bechamel. And so if I have like a little extra, I'm perfectly okay with that. Having a little extra of the white sauce. So just put your layers there, or your strips of sauce there. And then from here, we cannot forget the cheese. This is freshly grated by me mozzarella, but it is not fresh mozzarella. That's way too wet for a lasagna, in my opinion. So what I'm using is a block of Italian style Galbani whole milk mozzarella, and I have grated it. Get a nice layer on there because, you know, lasagna is all about the cheese, right? It's all about everything. But now this is freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano, and make sure you get the good stuff. Don't buy that like green can. Ugh. We used to have that growing up, but we've progressed since then. So now we're back to the noodles again. So this is now layer 2. So we're just going to speed this along just so we can get to putting it into the oven. All right, now I'm finishing up with my cheese, my mozzarella, and I'm sprinkling the Parmigiano Reggiano over the top. And I'm actually going to put this on a sheet tray because it is so full. My mom actually likes to press hers down a little bit just so it gets nice and compact. If you can do that, go ahead and do that. Just to make it nicer for cutting, because it can be, when it's really hot, it can be a difficult thing to cut lasagna just in general. If it's a good lasagna, that is. So I'm putting it on a sheet tray, and it's going to go into a 350-degree oven for 50 to 60 minutes, or until golden brown and bubbly. And here it is, fresh out of the oven. Oh my gosh. This is one of my favorite meals of all time. It's crusty on the outside. Oh, so I've let it cool for 15 minutes. We couldn't stand it any longer. The smell was just killing us. But I probably would have gone for 30 minutes if we weren't so darn hungry. Because when I'm making something like lasagna or spaghetti and meatballs, neither my husband nor myself tend to eat anything like all day long, just in anticipation for this. So this is a little harder to get out of the pan because I didn't wait too long, but that's okay. It's still going to taste phenomenal. It's the best darn lasagna ever. The cheese on top is crusty, and that bechamel is like, that's what makes it. In my opinion, that is what makes it. But a combination of everything, the fresh, homemade, gluten-free lasagna noodles, the sauce from heaven, and everything else. It's delicious, you guys. Enjoy.